Walk with me on this journey for a moment. Let's pretend you're 65 years old. You've worked nearly your entire life to not only support your family through your working years, but also to put money away to eventually be able to retire. Now, at this point, you've probably had some lingering questions along the way, but now they're starting to become bigger and more prominent questions, such as, if I retire, how do I know how much I can spend each month without running out of money in the long term, being at risk for that? Am I able to travel above and beyond that? Am I going to be able to give some assets to my kids or grandchildren in my retirement, even if I'm on more of a fixed income, if you will? When I do need assets in retirement, where do I pull money from? Do I pull from my pre-tax assets first, my taxable assets? Do I pull from my bank account? Do I turn on Social Security? What kind of tax implications does this all create? I've heard folks talk about doing Roth conversions. Is that something I need to look at? I've heard about Medicare premium increases as you make more income and get older and get closer to required minimum distribution age. Is that something I have to worry about? Well, if this sounds like you're in the right place. This is the exact situation we're going to go through in the example of Jack and Jill. They're 65 years old. They are on the precipice of retiring, and they have these exact questions, and they want to understand where their limits are, what guardrails they should have in place, and most importantly, what improvements to their situation can they make to not only live more comfortably in retirement and to really accomplish those goals that a balance sheet may not capture, but also to do everything they possibly can to pay less taxes over their lifetime and leave a bigger legacy to their children. If you're new here, my name is Matt Bouthillette. I'm a certified financial planner and enrolled agent with Oakleaf Wealth Management based out of Rhode Island, and we serve clients all over the United States. Let's jump in and introduce you to Jack and Jill. However, before I do, I want to go back and reiterate that this is not meant to be taken as any type of investment, tax, or any type of advice. This is a purely educational and illustrative video. As you could tell by the names Jack and Jill Smith, it is a fictional client, but the whole goal of this is to create a framework around what planning for a retirement with folks with a $3 million or so portfolio could look like, and to discuss strategies that a lot of folks are talking about out there and do it in an educational manner. So as we jump in here, Jack and Jill Smith, as mentioned, are age 65 years old. You will notice that they are based here in Rhode Island. That is where Oakleaf Wealth Management is based. So the taxation strategies on the state side will be Rhode Island specific. They do have two children, Jeff and Jennifer, who are in their early 30s. And this will relate back to them as we talk through the estate plan at the end of the video and Jack and Jill's goals for leaving a legacy to them. As we jump into their net worth, their total net worth as it stands today is approximately 4.27 million, and it's made up of a few different buckets. The first bucket is their cash. They have a good amount of checking and savings at approximately $310,000. They do have a sizable investment portfolio that equates to approximately 3 million. They have 800,000 in their taxable account, and they both have 401k plans, 1.2 in Jack's and a 1 million in Jill's respectively. Now, one thing I want to address from the onset here as we talk about retiring, creating income from these assets, and taxation, it is important to understand what taxation looks like for each of these accounts. So very quickly, if you pull money out of your joint investment account and it's at a long-term capital gain, for most people, it is a 15% tax. Now, all states have different capital gains tax brackets, so that is based on your respective state. But generally, if you're in a income bracket that equates to a 15% capital gains tax rate, that would be the rate on a long-term gain. Short terms are based on short-term rates. If you have a loss, that could be either balanced against other gains from that portfolio, or you can write up to $3,000 off on your taxes, again, depending on your situation. For the 401k plans for Jack and Jill, they are both assumed in this example as pre-tax accounts. So they get a tax break when this money went in. When the money is coming out for withdrawals, it is 100% taxable at their respective marginal and effective tax rates. As we jump down to their liabilities, there's only one, and it is Jill's car loan. There's approximately $32,000 left on that in the C8 a month. And they do have their primary residence in Newport, Rhode Island, beautiful Newport, valued at approximately $1 million. Jack and Jill shared that it was their goal to have this paid off before their retirement, and they did just that, and they could not be more thrilled. So this is how we get to that 4.3 or so million net worth figure, and we are going to be basing our analysis off of taking their income from their 3.3 million pool of assets. Now, as we jump into the baseline assumptions here, we do have Jack and Jill still working. They are currently making $180,000 for Jack and $150,000 for Jill, respectively. We don't have any planned distributions from their 401ks when they retire. In addition to their retirement assets, we do have Social Security built in here. The assumed age for Jack and Jill to collect at this point in the plan is age 70. For Jack, that benefit at age 70 would be equated off of their full retirement age balance of $3,500 a month. And for Jill, it would be based off her balance of $3,500 a month as well. They had similar earnings, so their Social Security numbers are fairly similar. Now, as we jump into what this all equates to from a goals standpoint, they do have goals of retiring this year at age 65. They specifically want to retire in October, which is just before the holidays, so they could spend the holiday season with their families and not have to worry about work at the end of the year. So that is what we're planning on. They are going to be spending a similar amount as they do now of $6,000 per month of living expenses. So this is your going out to eat, utilities, discretionary expenses, any type of fund money, if you will, really what they need month to month to live outside of their property taxes, homeowners insurance, car insurance, etc. In terms of medical, they will be eligible for Medicare since they are both over age 65. So in the analysis, we do base their Medicare premium off the adjusted gross income levels that Medicare sets each year. Above and beyond that, we do assume an out-of-pocket cost of approximately $5,000 for Jack and Jill, respectively, to create a buffer. Now, to get to more of the fun stuff, Jack and Jill shared that they've never really taken vacations over their working years. They've really worked on putting money aside for the future, being retirement, and also to support their family. So they did want to start traveling more, especially while they're more fit and able to. So they wanted to build in as a starting point $15,000 a year of a vacation goal. And that is something that they would start in this calendar year. They would love to take a trip right after they retire during the holiday season. Now, to round out what their situation looks like pre-retirement, Jack and Jill do max out their contributions to their 401k plans on a pre-tax basis. And they did have goals of maxing out these contributions, even though they're going to be retiring before the end of the calendar year. So this will speed up some of the contributions in their last few pay periods. In addition to that, as mentioned, currently they do pay taxes jointly, and then they do have living expenses of $6,000 a month. Payroll expenses are about $1,000 a month ongoing combined with medical dues, all the things factored in. Now, for me, in this type of framework, one of my favorite reports is this report right here, the cash flow report. Whether someone's making $1 million a year, $250,000 a year, or they're retiring, the cash flow report is really telling because it shows us what comes in, what's planned to go out, what kind of taxes you could pay, and where are those expenses being funded from? If you're working, it's probably from your earnings and additional savings. But if you're retired, it has to come from somewhere, and usually it's from cash or from your portfolio, or in Social Security in that case as well. So we're going to walk through what cash flow could look like for Jack and Jill to get a overview framework of what this could transpire to, and from there we're going to back into a few scenarios that Jack and Jill wanted to cover. So 2026, they do have a prorated year because they are retiring early, so their income is less than we were showing in the assumptions. They are going to take that vacation, so we have that goal of $15,000 for their upcoming trip. We have their tax payments, the amount they're saving into their 401ks, and then we have any potential cash left over that's going to be lumped in with their current savings account. Now, you will see in 2027 that the income flows are zero because we're deciding to delay Social Security until age 70. They do have expenses based on their current $6,000 a month living expenses, property taxes, insurance, homeowners insurance, their car loan, their vacation. That equates to about $129,000 of expenses for 2027. So you see that net outflow of $129,000. Now, where's that going to come from? In this initial analysis, we are assuming that Jack and Jill do pull from their cash to fund that because that's going to create, aside from their interest and dividends, a 0% tax event because they're pulling from a place that it was already taxed in their savings account. So in the initial analysis, they are assuming that Jack and Jill just live off of their cash and any bonds in their brokerage account for the foreseeable future until Social Security. Once Social Security kicks in, as you can see, that reduces the amount that has to come from the portfolio from the $140,000, $130,000 range down to the $33,000 range because of the fact that Social Security kicks in. Now, one thing we're going to get back to in a moment is what this looks like if Jack and Jill do some tax strategies in the interim to potentially reduce future taxation and attempt to control some level of their Medicare premium bracket. Because in this scenario, we're assuming that Jack and Jill pull from a non-taxable place first and their pre-tax assets continue to grow. Now, why this is important is because those pre-tax assets eventually will have to be withdrawn due to required minimum distributions. So required minimum distributions, for those who don't know, is a rule that only relates to pre-tax accounts, and the IRS says if you're born before 1960, your RMD age is age 73. It's from if you're born 1951 to 1960. If you're born 1960 or after, your RMD age is age 75. And this is the age that the IRS requires you to take money out of your pre-tax accounts, and you have no choice. So in this case, if Jack and Jill decide to hold off on taking money from their pre-tax accounts until they have to, there's going to create a potential tax bomb at age 75 because they're going to be required to take out a significant amount at that age, which could affect a few other areas of their situation. Bringing this back to the retirement plan, we then dive into what this looks like from a 30,000-foot view. So if we plan that Jack and Jill retire in October, and in this analysis they live to age 95, we do have inflation assumptions and below market growth assumptions in this scenario. So inflation we assume continues at 3% a year till they're age 95. The investments continue to grow about 6% per year on a conservative basis. The market has grown more than that over its history, but again, we want to be conservative in these type of analysis. So we show here that Jack and Jill are in a very good position to retire at 65 and be very much okay in the long term. What this is showing us is in the 1,000 trials that the Monte Carlo scenario ran, it was 100% probability of success based on the assumptions we had factored in. And it shows a median portfolio balance at that age 95 of 8.6 million. Now, what this means in terms of today's dollars, because we have inflation factored in, is we can see what it looks like from a purchasing power standpoint. So that 8.6 million at their age 95 buys about 3.5 million of assets today. So what that means is that from a longevity standpoint, Jack and Jill are not quite cutting into their purchasing power. They are mostly living off the interest, not the principal, which is great news and is really something that Jack and Jill were excited about. However, off of that, they did have concerns about future taxation. They hear people talk about Roth conversions. They hear people talking about collecting Social Security while it's still there, Medicare premium bracket increases. What's all that about? So next we're going to dive into some adjustments that we suggested Jack and Jill make in order to create an efficiency, not only in the shorter term from a predictability standpoint, but in the longer term, which does have a little bit more of potential room for error, but creates some flexibility and choice down the road. Now, before we get into the more exciting strategies, one thing I also thought was more exciting that I recommended to Jack and Jill was to consider spending more in their retirement. So as I mentioned, that probability of success number is really a temperature check on what their plan would look like if they go through 1,000 different market scenarios. Now, in our opinion, the 100% probability of success isn't necessarily indicative of how happy a retirement you can have, because when it's 100% probability of success, you can make the argument that there's more spending to be done, and you may be limiting yourself if you're trying to continue that 100% probability number. So what I did here for Jack and Jill was I showed them what it would look like if they started to spend more. So instead of $6,000 a month when they retire, they started to spend $8,000 a month in addition to the expense assumptions we had on top of that. So travel, homeowners insurance, property tax, etc. And in this case, there still was 100% probability of success. Their asset level was lower, which makes sense because they're spending more money in the shorter term, but they're still okay in the long term. Now, Jack and Jill said that that is great for them to know and understand. However, in this case, they still want to base that $6,000 expense because, to their words, they're savers. They've been saving their entire life. They're not necessarily going to change how and what they spend money on. It's more going to be where they spend it in terms of on their kids, on travel. And they're more interested in looking at some taxation strategies that are going to be able to help them be more tax efficient, but also leave a more tax efficient legacy behind for their kids. Okay. Now, what I've started to do here is to show what it would look like if Jack and Jill started to do some level of Roth conversions. Now, Roth conversions can be a very controversial topic because some folks will say convert everything because we know tax rates today. Some will say you don't need to. You're going to be in a similar tax bracket when you get to required minimum distribution age and than you are today. Well, we do find that this is very situational. It has to be customized to a couple's situation to be able to understand whether or not it makes sense. And Jack and Jill in this case are perfect candidates to look at Roth conversions because they have a good amount of cash outside of their retirement accounts and their checking and savings. They have a non-retirement brokerage account, which has different tax rates than their pre-tax dollars. And they do have a good amount of time, approximately 9-10 years, before they do hit that RMD age to do some planning. So I won't show you all the analysis we went through on the back end to get to this point, but we've assumed that we do a $100,000 Roth conversion the first year of retirement from Jack's 401k. And then outside of that, we do Roth conversions from 2028 to essentially the year before they take RMDs at age 74 for Jill in the amount of $150,000 per year. Now, the goal is to keep the effective rate around 15%. They're going to be in the 22% marginal tax bracket when they do this, so we're not going to quite max out that bracket, but we really want to focus on that effective rate, what actual dollars they're paying on these conversions. So we're going to jet over to our taxation tab and really show what this will look like. So in 2027, under the proposed plan, which is the Roth conversion analysis, you do see the $100,000 of Roth conversion coming over on their return in a taxable amount. And they do have interest in dividends from their savings account and their brokerage account that will continue to be still only about $80,000 in 2027 because there's no Social Security. They're living off their cash. It's purely just the Roth conversion, dividends, and interest that are taxable. And as we start to increase this into 2028 and we do 150,000 conversion, their taxable income does go up from the 12% tax bracket marginally to 22%, and that effective rate starts to creep up. Now, what I wanted to really show here is, and I will get to the effective rate numbers in a moment, is sticking on the pure 1040 example here. If we go to 2035, which is the year before that they, 2036, the year that they do turn required minimum distribution age, this is a scenario where they've done those Roth conversions pretty much up until they've turned age 75. And this is what the taxation example looks like from if they do conversions and if they don't. And this is where we really determine from a long-term standpoint if this makes some sense. Of course, this is a long, long time that we're planning for. So there will be iterations along the way, depending on what's going on in their life each year. But the whole goal of this conceptually is to understand what the potential could look like if everything went to plan, so to speak, and adjusting as life truly evolves. So in this case, you can see in 2036, when Jack and Jill are 75, their required amount to take from their pre-tax accounts, so we're no longer doing Roth conversions, this is purely just what they have to take out to satisfy their RMD, is $85,000. Now that puts them at an adjusted gross income bracket of $219,000 and a taxable income bracket of $171,000. So they're in the 22% marginal tax bracket, and for Medicare purposes, they're still in that lowest bracket for premium. So there's no increase here. Now, in the current plan, if you recall, if Jack and Jill do nothing, no conversions, and they continue to let those pre-tax accounts grow until their required minimum distribution age, it's a much different story. So you can see here that their required distribution is approximately $150,000 in 2036. This does create an additional increase in their AGI to $294,000, which will, in effect, create an increase in their Medicare bracket down the road. And their taxable income is significantly higher at $246,000, which pushes them into the 24% marginal bracket. So more of those dollars are taxed at 22 and 24%, which creates their effective rate to increase. So when we bring this back down to the detail here, I'm just going to go to the effective tax rate. When we start again with the proposed plan, doing more Roth conversions earlier is going to create more taxation, period. But Jack and Jill in this case may be okay with that for the potential benefit down the road. So if you think about it, if we can, in a perfect world, again, just an example, if we can pay more taxes over the next 9 or 10 years to then create the ability for you to be in a lower tax bracket for potentially the rest of your life and a lower Medicare premium bracket for the potentially rest of your life, rather than if we did nothing and you'll be in a higher bracket forever, then the benefits can be seen as substantial. Again, this is all illustrative, but conceptually, this is what we're trying to get across. Now, from an effective tax rate standpoint, you can see that this does jet up their effective rate to approximately 13.8, 14% almost immediately when we start doing conversions. Now, in the earlier years when we're not converting as much, their effective rate's much lower. If you recall what I mentioned, even if they go into the 22% marginal tax bracket, we're only modeling it off of what their effective tax rate is, meaning what actual tax dollars are they paying on their taxable income, and we're targeting below 15%. So as you see here, the effective rate continues, and then all of a sudden it drops because we've done enough conversion up until their age 75 that they are now in a lower tax bracket because the amount they have to take out of their pre-tax accounts is less than if they did nothing. So their effective rate actually drops 5% to 10% of an effective tax rate on the federal level, even though they're in the 22% marginal tax bracket. Versus if they did nothing and they just continue to have their assets grow and they have a huge RMD at age 75, you can see that their effective tax rate is essentially 0, 3%, 3%, close to 4%. And then all of a sudden at age 75, it shoots up to an effective rate of 13%. And it continues and it continues and it continues. Now, this from a taxation standpoint creates more on the back end in this example, but their Medicare bracket is really what's affected as well because they jump up and their premiums respectively per month are going to increase as well. So that adds the potential expense in their retirement in addition to taxation. Now, one thing I really like to dig in through on this is what this could look like if everything went according to plan, if you will. Again, it's all illustrative, but what it could look like from a pure tax dollar standpoint. Matt, if you're telling me that this is going to be a great strategy, how much is that tax dollar? How much of those tax dollars are really going to be reduced in the long term? Well, luckily, we have a report for that in the software. So this shows us, based on the current plan in terms of doing Roth conversions from now until just before they turn RMD age, and then they continue on to take their RMDs and live till age 95. Of course, the longer you live, the better this looks, all that being equal. This does show that based on what we're inputting, based on the numbers and the analysis on the back end, that they would pay Jack and Jill approximately $390,000 or so less taxes over their lifetime than if they just left their pre-tax assets alone and did no conversions. So this leaves us with a couple of different conclusions. One, it shows that Jack and Jill have a lot of flexibility to retire at age 65, whether they do Roth conversions or not, which is a wonderful thing, and that's ultimately the base case here and what we're shooting for. Two, it shows us that from a Roth conversion standpoint, they are good candidates for it because they can have taxes being paid from their cash outside of their retirement accounts, so we're not withholding money that's going to dilute the conversion. One. Number two, they do have the ability to create this flexibility and choice down the road. Now, we can find a middle ground here and convert less and play with the tax brackets a little more, but conceptually, the whole point is that there is some viability for Jack and Jill to be able to do conversions today to potentially reduce their taxation down the road while paying some of the brunt of that taxation today. Now, as we wrap up today, I wanted to drive home one specific point, is that through all the craziness that we went through with the numbers and the income, expenses, assumption, portfolios, taxation, it all comes down to building a roadmap for Jack and Jill. We built a roadmap first and foremost to understand where they're at today, what their income looks like up until retirement, what their income is going to look like and expenses into and throughout retirement, and what that means for them in the longer term to, one, confirm that they can retire in October of this year. That was the most important thing that we had to uncover, but we needed to build the underlying framework to get there. From that point, we were able to run a few additional scenarios. One was if they spent $2,000 a month more than initially assumed, or what if they did multi-year Roth conversions to have the potential of reducing their lifetime tax bill. These are all alternatives that, whether they choose to do or not, Jack and Jill were still going to be okay in the longer term, but it shows them the options that they have to create flexibility and choice. Now, it should go without saying, but Jack and Jill's numbers are not going to be the same as your numbers. Everyone's portfolio makeup is different. Everyone's lifestyle is different. Everyone's income and expense situation is different. Jack and Jill, first and foremost, were created as for educational and illustrative purposes for this video. So they're not a real client, but the underlying purpose remains and should be driven home that no matter what your portfolio is, a $5 million portfolio, $3 million, $1 million, lifestyle choices. It's all going to be unique to you. So it's really important that if you're serious about your retirement planning, you get your ducks in a row. You understand what type of income you have, what type of expenses you have, if there'll be additional expenses in retirement, how your portfolio is made up, what's in pre-tax, what's in Roth, what's in taxable, what's in cash. Really understanding what your situation looks like, being able to run your own projections, and determining what direction you want to go and what options you have to create flexibility and choice. Now, I highly recommend you talk to your financial planning team. If you have specific questions for us, we do this every day for our clients. If you have questions, comments, concerns, want to engage with us, I do have a link in the show notes for our website. Feel free to navigate there, learn a little bit more about us, and feel free to reach out to us with questions, comments, and again, just any engagement that you want to have with us. We're more than happy to have a conversation. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Retire with a Belief and what it looks like to retire with a $3 million portfolio. And I look forward to seeing you again soon.